On the day we were supposed to register our marriage, my boyfriend publicly announced his true love. Just like that, I was betrayed. Out of sheer anger, I married his archrival instead. Later, he confronted me, "You really married the one person I hate most, just to get back at me? And you say you don't love me?" His so-called nemesis slid an arm around my waist and chuckled coldly. My wifey simply came to her senses and stopped wasting love on a dog. "And you think you deserve her?" I had waited outside the Civil Affairs Bureau for 4 hours. Cameron still hadn't shown up. Several couples had already gone in and come out. Each pair glanced at me before whispering to each other as they left. I didn't blame them. I was already standing here when they went in. When they came back out, I was still standing here. Anyone with half a brain could tell I had been stood up. But it turned out things weren't that simple. Right before the bureau closed, I tried calling Cameron one more time. The familiar message played, "Sorry, the number you dialed is currently on another call." Then, I opened WeChat. Just as I was about to hit the voice call button, I saw Cameron's latest moments post. "You are my sunshine." Attached was a photo of a soft, glowing silhouette of a woman. In the lower left corner, subtly filtered into the image, were the words, "True love." True love? Huh. I let out a short, bitter laugh. If Cameron weren't my fiancé, if today weren't supposed to be our registration day, I might have given the post a like, maybe even left a congratulatory comment. But there were no ifs. On the very day we were to register, he publicly declared someone else his true love on social media. So not only was I stood up, I was cheated on. Within minutes, comments poured in. "Congrats, bro. You and sis-in-law finally made it official. Congrats. She's beautiful. Damn, getting hit with PDA in broad daylight. All blessings." No one found anything off. Except for one comment that stood out, "Isn't this Rachel? You forgot to switch to your alt account." Within minutes, the other comments were scrubbed clean. Only that one remained, bold and unshaken. Soon after, Cameron deleted the post. But it didn't matter. I had already taken a screenshot. Using the location embedded in the post, I found where he was. In a private room at a bar, Cameron was drinking with his so-called brothers. There was only one woman in the room. The very same woman from the WeChat post. She was sitting right next to him. The moment I walked in, it was as if someone had pressed pause. The once lively room instantly fell silent. "Sis-in-law?" Someone stammered. I glanced at him, it was the same guy who had commented, "Congrats," on the post. I smiled, but not kindly. "So, you're all together now?" A flush of color spread across their faces, red, white, green, purple. Cameron stood up and rushed over. "Rachel, we were just playing truth or dare. I lost that post. Do you know what today is?" I cut him off. He went silent. I raised an eyebrow. So he did know. I didn't speak further. That silence made him even more uneasy. Because being stood up on the day of your marriage registration, anyone would lose it. But I didn't. I just waited, calmly, for his explanation. "Rachel, I'm sorry. Things at the company have been a mess lately. I've been so busy. I didn't want this situation to distract me." Cameron's voice was full of apology, his eyes seemingly sincere. Then came the heartfelt declaration, "But I love you. TCH. What a joke." I pulled my hand out of his grasp without changing expression, a mocking smile playing on my lips. "We've been engaged for 2 years. Our wedding is next month. If you didn't want to get married so soon, why didn't you say something earlier? You claim to be busy and in love with me, yet you ditched me on our registration day, came here to drink, and even posted that she's your true love? Cameron, is this supposed to be a joke?" His face froze. There was a hint of displeasure in his eyes. While I was still wondering what he had to be unhappy about, the girl from the post suddenly stood up. "Miss Ariano, don't you get it? Mr. Nelson doesn't want to get married so soon. I heard it was you who insisted on being with him. Mr. Nelson is talented and ambitious, don't you think it's unfair to trap him in a marriage this early?" What kind of self-righteous White Lotus talk was that? I was stunned. Even more so because Cameron didn't deny a word. I tilted my head toward her. "You know him that well?" She lifted her chin. "No, we've only talked a few times. A few conversations," and she had the nerve to say all that? But Cameron and I had known each other for 10 years. I turned to him. "Is that what you think too?" Cameron met my eyes. "Sorry, Rachel." "Well then." I sighed. "If that's the case, let's not talk about marriage. You go explain to your parents. I'll speak with my father. The wedding is off." As soon as I said that, Cameron looked visibly relieved. He eagerly grabbed my hand. "Rachel, you're so understanding. Don't worry, I'll explain to Uncle. Once I've made my name, I'll give you the grand wedding you deserve." "No need for that," I replied calmly. But given the engagement between our families, some of our joint projects may face complications. I'll handle those. He froze. What do you mean? You didn't understand? I mean, the wedding is off. We're breaking up. I turned and left without hesitation. The cold wind outside snapped me out of my haze, sobering me up instantly. As I recalled the confrontation I had just had with Cameron, a wave of regret surged through me. That was reckless. Cameron and I were in a business marriage. This wasn't just about two individuals, but also the companies behind us. By breaking off the engagement on impulse, I had likely jeopardized the cooperation between our families, and the board had already been uncertain about continuing to support me. This fiasco would only add fuel to the fire. Frustrated and restless, one name came to mind, Vincent White. I opened the screenshot I'd taken earlier. The one comment that exposed the truth beneath Cameron's post, it was from Vincent. If there was one person who could replace Cameron as my husband, it had to be Vincent. After all, he had been one of the original candidates when the idea of a strategic marriage was first discussed. Back then, I hadn't even graduated college yet. My father had fallen ill and could no longer manage the company, so I stepped in. I knew nothing about business or leadership. I'd majored in fine arts, not finance. My early days in the company were filled with failure and frustration. But after 3 years of relentless work, I built up my network and strength. To gain the board's full backing, I agreed to a marriage alliance. Both Cameron and Vincent were strong contenders. They came from powerful families, and their companies were equally influential. Either alliance would bring great benefit to the Arellano family. But there was a key difference. Cameron had grown up pampered, proud and entitled. Vincent, on the other hand, had dropped out of high school at 17 after his father's death to shoulder the family business. While the rest of us were off at college, partying and posting photos, Vincent was flying across the country negotiating contracts. That was the difference between him and us. Among our peers, people still called us Junior, like Little President so-and-so. But Vincent? He was already President White. He even became a regular guest on the city's financial news programs. Why did I choose Cameron back then? First, we were high school and college classmates. We knew each other well. Second, marrying him wouldn't limit my position. I could still stay in my family's company. As for Vincent, he was certainly capable, but there was something intimidating about that capability. He reminded me of the deep sea, calm on the surface, but cold and dark where the light couldn't reach. Powerful. Ruthless. During the 2 years Cameron and I were engaged, Vincent had stolen quite a few deals from the Nelson Group. Naturally, Cameron hated him. Whenever they ran into each other at events, Cameron would sneer or provoke him. Vincent never responded. He simply ignored him. He was only a year older than us, but carried himself with a calm, detached maturity that made him seem out of place among our crowd. There was one time I happened to be present. Cameron lost face and slammed his cards down, grabbing me by the wrist to leave. I hadn't even processed what happened when I instinctively turned to glance back. And saw Vincent watching me. His brows were furrowed, his dark eyes seemed to swirl with something unreadable. That look wasn't exactly earth-shattering, but it sent a chill down my spine and made my heart race. I found Vincent's WeChat. After hesitating for a long while, I finally sent a message, "Where are you?" I thought he might ignore me. But to my surprise, he instantly shared his location. So fast, in fact, it made me wonder if he had been waiting for that message all along. My temples throbbed. I felt caught between a rock and a hard place. But then I thought of the things Cameron said tonight. I gritted my teeth and ordered a ride to the hotel address Vincent had sent. When I arrived, I realized the hotel room was actually a billiards lounge. That alone helped ease some of my nerves. I put on a smile and walked toward the table. President White. Vincent was playing pool. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up. As he leaned forward for a shot, the muscles on his back tensed and curved with strength and precision, an elegant and restrained wildness. Crack. He broke the formation cleanly with one powerful strike. There was no one else in the room. He didn't acknowledge me. Just kept playing. He was doing it on purpose, leaving me hanging. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep speaking. President White, I know you saw that post. I saw it too. I came here tonight because I need your help. Still silence. In the time it took me to say that, Vincent had already pocketed several balls. I bit my lip, stepped forward, and blocked his view. President White, I know this is bold, but, if you're willing to marry me, I'll offer you 100% of my sincerity. Crack. This time, the shot missed. Vincent paused. There were several long, agonizing seconds after I finished speaking. Then, he straightened up. His dark eyes were deep and unreadable as they locked onto my face. A shiver ran down my spine. President. I told you before, Cameron isn't right for you. Now that you've run headfirst into a brick wall and gotten hurt, you come to me, a month before your wedding, asking to marry me instead? What am I, some prop in your little lover's quarrel? His voice was low and heavy, pounding against my heart. He stood a full head taller than me. As he looked down, the weight of his presence and his words pressed hard against me, making my scalp tingle. At this point, I decided, screw it. What's done is done. Fine. Call me blind. You're right, President White. I shouted, eyes shut tight. Silence fell over the entire billiards room. Vincent pressed his lips together and said nothing. We were supposed to register today. But Cameron stood me up. And then he posted that. I knew it was shameless, using emotions as bargaining chips. But we were both business people. Just like Vincent had once dropped out of school to take over his family's company, I couldn't let my father's legacy fall apart under my hands. Marrying Vincent made more sense now than ever. At least for me. For him, though? I didn't finish that thought. I just stood there, nervously waiting for his answer. I thought he'd tell me to get lost. But instead, he handed me a cue stick. There are 3 balls left. Sink them, and I'll say yes. What? Only if you can make the shots, he said coolly, turning away and heading to the bar for water. I clutched the cue stick. I didn't know how to play pool. All I could do was mimic Vincent's earlier movements. To my surprise, I actually sunk the first ball on my first shot. I froze, instinctively glancing at Vincent. He clearly hadn't expected it either. The cup in his hand paused midway to his lips. 2 more, he said coolly, then took a sip of water. I was getting nervous. Vincent just smiled? It was barely noticeable, but I caught it. Funny. He looked so approachable in photos, so why did he seem like someone mourning a lost wifey in real life? Later, as I stood lost in thought, holding the still-warm marriage certificate in my hands, Vincent walked over. Where are you headed? I'll drive you. No need, I replied. You go ahead. I've got something to take care of. He didn't press, just gave a short reminder, call me if you need anything. I nodded. After parting ways with Vincent, I went home. My father was practicing calligraphy. I approached cautiously, nervous. After all, I had a freshly minted marriage certificate in my pocket. Rachel, you're back, he said, setting his brush down. Come take a look at the wedding invitations I wrote for you and Cameron. What do you think of the calligraphy? Since his illness, my father had largely stepped away from the business. He wasn't the sole founder, and his retirement had placed an enormous burden on me. All I'd ever wanted was to live up to his expectations, even going so far as to agree to a marriage alliance with the Nelson family for the company's sake. Now I'd called off the engagement on my own and turned around to marry Vincent. He didn't know yet. And I had no idea how he'd react once he did. Would it give him a heart attack? I stood there for a long time without saying a word. My father looked at me, puzzled. What's wrong? I clenched my jaw and summoned every ounce of courage I had. I got married. He chuckled. I know. Didn't you get the certificate yesterday? Where's Cameron? Didn't he come back with you? It wasn't Cameron. It was Vincent. His eyes widened in disbelief. What did you just say? I pulled the marriage certificate out of my pocket and set it down in front of him. He picked it up. His breath hitched sharply. His hands trembled. Dad. I called out, worried. But he was a man who had weathered many storms. He calmed down quickly. Though not completely. He slowly lowered himself into the chair, eyes fixed on the names and photo in the little red booklet. Eventually, he looked up at me again. What happened? Surprisingly, he didn't scold me. My eyes turned red. I told him everything that had happened the day before. He was silent for a long time. Then, he tore up the wedding invitations. This marriage is better off not happening. I'll call the Nelsons and cancel everything between our families. After venting, his expression shifted to concern. But wasn't marrying Vincent a bit impulsive? Why don't you divorce him? It's okay if you don't want to be married. The company doesn't rest on your shoulders alone. Divorce? Already? Vincent's words from last night echoed in my head. If I filed for divorce right after getting the certificate, I'd truly be treating him like a pawn. No, Dad, it's fine. Vincent is actually a really good guy. I tried to speak up for Vincent. But then I realized, I barely knew anything about him. Under my dad's eager, questioning gaze, I blurted the first lie I could think of, he's had a crush on me for years. Somehow, I convinced him. Still uneasy, he insisted on meeting Vincent in person. Afraid of exposing the truth, I said maybe another day. But my dad didn't waste time. As soon as I left, he called the Nelsons and canceled everything. The next day, Cameron called me. Rachel. Are you serious? His voice was full of outrage, crackling through the phone. What do you mean, serious? You're really calling off the wedding? It's not like I said I wouldn't marry you. Do you have to make such a big deal out of this? His self-righteous tone actually made me want to laugh. You'd think I was the one who cheated on him. Cameron, why are you so upset? Didn't you say you weren't ready to get married? I thought calling off the engagement would make you happy. Oh, I see. It's because of the inheritance fight, isn't it? You think this breakup will hurt your standing in the Nelson Group? I replied casually. Cameron lost it on the other end. What the hell are you talking about? You think you or your Ariano Corporation mean something? You think you, Rachel, could ever influence my place in Nelson Group? That position is mine, period. Sure, if you say so. Though I've heard your half-brother's quite the rising star. I could hear him breathing heavily, clearly fuming. He hung up on me in anger. But not before leaving a final warning, you'd better watch out. Even at a time like this, Cameron still thought he was some untouchable rich heir. In our circle, people our age had long since started working in the family business, preparing to inherit someday. And when a secret child showed up and started threatening that succession, well, then things got messy. Unfortunately for Cameron, that's exactly what had happened. For over 20 years, he'd lived recklessly, convinced he was the Nelson Group's sole heir. But 2 years ago, his father brought back a son from a former lover, one he'd had before striking it rich. Not only was this half-brother older than Cameron by a few months, he was also far more capable. Cameron's mother quickly realized this newcomer posed a threat to her son's status. That's when she agreed to the marriage alliance with me, to help secure Cameron's position. You could say Cameron and I were using each other. But now that the marriage was off, the consequences hit us both, but especially him. He was genuinely furious. So much so that, right after taking over as a manager, he announced he was canceling all collaboration with the Ariano Corporation. Word of the situation quickly reached our company. The board of directors held an emergency meeting the very next morning, just to reprimand me. I braced myself and endured the scolding. Under all that pressure, I had no choice but to boldly promise, as I always did, that we'd recover the lost partnership through other means. The board members were so furious, they nearly blew steam out of their ears. In the end, they gave me a month. But I didn't need a month. Because shortly after, I received a call from the business division of Vincent's company. As soon as they learned the cooperation with Nelson Group was ending, they visited us. And brought with them several high-profit projects. Not only did these completely make up for the loss caused by the Nelson Group withdrawal, but the revenue projections also far exceeded our next quarter targets. It was a big deal to have a shot at working with White Enterprises. After all, Vincent and Cameron were direct competitors. Because of our engagement with the Nelson family, Ariano Corporation had long been excluded from potential partnerships with White Enterprises. So when White Enterprises suddenly came knocking, everyone grew suspicious. Before the team left, one of Vincent's people said, "We're very sincere about this collaboration, and President White has great confidence in young President Ariano's ability." The moment that was said, everyone understood, this partnership had everything to do with me. Though I had married Vincent for less than romantic reasons, I never intended to use our relationship to manipulate him or burden him with obligation. The Ariano family didn't have much to offer him anyway. Still, I dragged myself to make the call, to be clear about where I stood. The decision to work with your company was based on a thorough assessment from our marketing department, Vincent replied. Your corporation's capabilities are well recognized in the industry. I simply offered a suggestion. His voice was cold and formal, just like him, strictly business. The long speech I had prepared stuck in my throat. Oh. Since he'd made it clear, I had nothing more to say. Once this deal was over and the crisis passed, I'd make it up to him in the next negotiation by giving him a bigger share. That would settle the debt. Resolved, I was about to hang up when Vincent spoke again. Rachel. When are you free? I need to discuss a few things with you regarding our marriage. Perfect timing. I had wanted to speak with him too. Tomorrow at noon? All right. The next day, I left work 10 minutes early and headed to the cafe we agreed on. I thought I was early. But Vincent was already there. President White, I greeted. He glanced up at me and gently reminded, "We're married now. You don't have to be so formal." Okay. Vincent. He nodded with lowered eyes and opened the folder on the table, pushing it toward me. Here. I need you to sign these. Equity transfer agreement and marital property division contract. What? I looked up at him in confusion. Our marriage happened quickly. We didn't have time to talk about bride price or assets. I'm voluntarily transferring 5% of my company's shares to you, he said. Additionally, if we divorce due to any fault on my part, all post-marriage property will go to you. I'll walk away with nothing. Then he added, "This is my sincerity." I was stunned. Even saying something like that, Vincent remained perfectly serious, like he was negotiating a contract. He handed me a pen. "If there's no issue, please sign." No. I almost instinctively waved my hand in refusal. Vincent's gaze deepened. Is there a problem? Yes, no. That's not the problem, I stammered. This was absurd. Marrying me was already unfair to him. How could I accept such extreme sincerity on top of it? Vincent, I can't accept these. I tried to explain. It was overwhelming, and I stumbled over my words. But I managed to get the point across. As soon as I did, a cold sweat broke across my back. I had handled many negotiations before, but somehow I always felt out of my depth with Vincent. And honestly, Vincent was ridiculous too. He'd been in business for over a decade. Businessmen valued profit. And marrying me? Not exactly a strategic win. Yet he had the nerve to offer 2 contracts that put him at a complete disadvantage. After I finished speaking, his expression didn't soften. If anything, it looked even darker. Rachel, this marriage isn't a business deal to me. What? I froze again. His words startled me, but I didn't dare ask more. It just felt too surreal. Seeing that I still hadn't signed, Vincent didn't press. We just sat there, locked in a quiet standoff. Finally, I relented. If that's how you feel, then I'll show my sincerity too. I currently hold 5% of Ariano Corporation's shares. I'll give you half. And if we divorce due to my fault, I'll also walk away with nothing. All right. And if neither of us is at fault, we don't talk about divorce at all. Okay. Vincent moved fast. His company was right next door. He had his team reprint the agreements, and right there in the cafe, we completed the most absurd signing ceremony of my life. After we signed, Vincent asked, "Do you have anything planned this afternoon?" I shook my head. "Then come with me. I want to show you something." Okay. I followed him without asking too many questions. When we arrived, I realized he had brought me to a villa complex. "This is where I live," he said. "I've decided to make it our marital home." He entered the code and turned to me. The numbers looked familiar, it was my birthday. Vincent explained calmly, "Since this house counts as part of our marital assets, I figured your birthday was a good password." Right. Sounded reasonable. He led me inside. The house was spacious, with many rooms and fully functional zones. Vincent gave me a full tour. When we reached the 2nd floor, he stopped by a room next to the master bedroom. I thought it was a study. But he said, "This is my treasure room." Treasure room? Vincent has hobbies like this? I blinked in surprise. He looked at me. "Want to take a look?" I didn't notice the glint of anticipation in his eyes. I just thought, if it's a treasure room, it must hold something valuable. And since we were barely familiar newlyweds, maybe it was better to give him a bit of privacy. So I shook my head. "Maybe next time." His hand was already on the doorknob. At my response, he slowly let go. "All right," he said quietly. Then he led me away to continue the tour. In my mind, even though we were now married, we still needed to give each other a bit of personal space. So I turned him down. "No, maybe next time." Vincent's hand was already resting on the doorknob. Upon hearing my response, he slowly pulled it back. "All right," he replied in a low voice. I turned around and walked off in another direction. On the way downstairs, I noticed the grand piano sitting in the center of the living room. "This yours?" You play piano?" I asked, genuinely surprised. Vincent lowered his gaze. "I studied a bit in high school. I did too, though I had no musical talent. But I was pretty decent at drawing." High school. That was already 10 years ago. Vincent continued giving me a full tour of the house. By the time we were done, it was already 3 in the afternoon. "There's a housekeeper who comes daily to clean," he said. "That was good to know." I nodded. Vincent's gaze lingered on me. I noticed he seemed like he wanted to say something. "What is it?" "You can move in," he said. I was speechless. So direct. Too direct. I stood frozen in place, and a wave of heat rushed to my face, flushing my cheeks red. Vincent didn't seem to think there was anything inappropriate about what he said. And honestly, it wasn't. We were legally married, after all. Living together made sense. So, just like that, I moved into Vincent's house. And began our life of cohabitation. Though to be honest, nothing much happened between us. I was busy. Vincent was even busier. Sometimes, even after coming home, he still had to work in his study. And ever since we'd cut ties with Nelson Group, I had been doing everything I could to quickly adapt to our new collaboration with White Enterprises. That often meant working from home. President White, ever the generous one, gave me half of his office space. "This is our first time working together," he said. "If there's anything you don't understand, just ask me." Vincent would wear a pair of blue light glasses while working, resting on the bridge of his nose. The lenses reflected the glow from the computer screen. His words sounded gentle. But his face? Stone cold. Especially the way he looked at you, serious, distant, intimidating. Like a strict teacher from high school. I nodded like a scared little bird. But honestly, I didn't dare to ask too much. Later on, some friction cropped up during the collaboration between our two companies. When I came home that night, I casually grumbled about it to Vincent. To my surprise, the next day, his team became unusually cooperative. I blinked. Oh. Classic iceberg CEO, cold on the outside, warm on the inside. As the collaboration gradually settled into place, I finally escaped my routine of working overtime at home every night. Both sides had grown more in sync, and eventually, someone suggested we all have dinner together after work. Young President Ariano, join us? I didn't have the heart to decline, so I went along. Midway through the meal, I got a call from Vincent. He asked if I was free that evening. Some of his close friends were having a gathering, and he wanted to bring me along. I asked for the location, and he sent me a pin. I replied, we're having a dinner too. I'll come over as soon as we're done here, okay? Alright. Once the work dinner was winding down, I excused myself, saying I had to meet a former client. Then I sent Vincent a message and headed toward the private room he had reserved. As soon as the server opened the door for me, the chatter inside abruptly stopped. They all froze. And so did I. Rachel? What are you doing here? The voice belonged to none other than Cameron. I hadn't expected him to be here too. Wasn't this one of Vincent's circles? Didn't he usually avoid any event where Cameron was present? I didn't want anything to do with Cameron. But then I saw the woman sitting next to him. The moment she noticed my gaze, Cameron wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Let me introduce you, this is my girlfriend. Of course. I knew her. She was the one from the WeChat post. The same one who'd stood up and spoken with such righteous indignation when I'd confronted them at the bar. The two of them being together was absolutely no surprise. I looked away indifferently, scanning the room for Vincent. Oddly enough, he was nowhere to be seen. Could he not be in this room? But the room number matched what he sent. Just as I was puzzling over it, Cameron spoke up. You didn't come here looking for me, did you? Well, since you're here, have a seat. He asked the server to bring over a chair beside him. I remained standing. Since Vincent wasn't here, I figured I'd leave. But Cameron had clearly lost his mind tonight. Leaving so soon? Come on, it's been ages. You know everyone here. We might not call you sis-in-law anymore, but young President Ariano has its own kind of power, doesn't it? Everyone in the room was familiar to me. Several of them were Cameron's close buddies, the same ones who used to call me sis-in-law at every turn. Now, with Cameron's words, it was obvious he was mocking me, right in front of them. I shot him a cold glance, finding his behavior both petty and pathetic. I ignored him. But seeing me disregard him like that only enraged Cameron further. Rachel. Don't you walk away from me. He slammed the table, voice sharp and aggressive. It did startle me. I had just turned to leave when the door suddenly opened. Maybe I looked a little pale, because the person walking in frowned the moment he saw me. It was Vincent. Where were you? I asked. I hadn't even realized it, but just seeing him calmed me. Even though my heart was still pounding. You said you were almost here. I didn't need to finish the sentence. He had come to pick me up, but somehow missed me. Didn't matter. He'd returned in time. And saw me, saw how shaken I looked. What happened? Nothing. Just got startled a bit. In that room, the only person capable of scaring me like that was Cameron. After all, he was the only one standing, looking like he was ready to rip someone apart. Vincent's eyes darkened, his cold gaze slicing through the air like a blade, landing directly on Cameron. Everyone in the room went still, as if frozen. No one spoke. They all stared in confusion, unsure what to make of the interaction between Vincent and me. Cameron looked the most confused of all. His expression wasn't just one of surprise, it also carried doubt and suspicion. Until Vincent reached for my hand and gently pulled me toward the head of the table. Let me introduce my wife, Rachel, he announced calmly. The room fell even quieter. At that moment, everyone seemed to forget how to breathe. All eyes widened in unison. I wasn't unfamiliar with being the center of attention. But this time, my palms broke into a nervous sweat. Vincent's gaze swept across the room, finally pausing on Cameron. We're all brothers here. You can just call her sister-in-law. The room fell into stunned silence. But eventually, everyone snapped out of it. One by one, they raised their glasses. Sister-in-law. Sister-in-law. Oh my God, so you are our sister-in-law. I was wondering why Bro Vincent was treating us to such a nice dinner. It was to introduce you. A few people took the lead in teasing playfully. I noticed Vincent didn't stop them, which told me these were probably his close friends. So I smiled along as well. If anyone was having a terrible night, it had to be Cameron. From the moment Vincent announced who I was, his face had gone ghost white, like someone had painted over him with ash. He didn't even bother pretending for the sake of the girl beside him. When everyone started talking and toasting to me, he finally seemed to snap out of his daze. Vincent blocked every drink sent my way. She doesn't like alcohol, he said casually, but firmly. Didn't like, not couldn't drink. In the past, whenever I negotiated with clients, drinking was inevitable. Even if I didn't want to, I had to force myself. I never imagined there'd come a day when someone would shield me like this, and I'd get to enjoy the rare privilege of being the one who doesn't drink at the table. Vincent chatted with the others. A group of them started teasing him again. Said he wasn't being a true brother, sneaking off to get married without telling anyone, and insisted on punishing him with shots. Vincent didn't refuse. I grew a little concerned and tugged on his sleeve. Don't worry, he said, I can handle it. Relieved, I sipped on my juice and watched him from the side. He still looked distant and aloof, but his brows were more relaxed, his eyes clear and calm. There was even the faintest smile tugging at his lips. He radiated a quiet, unassuming kind of brightness. If Vincent could hold his liquor this well, we wouldn't need to worry about him embarrassing himself at the wedding. Wait. Wedding? That random thought made me stiffen. No one could have known what I was thinking. But my face still flushed red instantly. I shook off the romantic daydream. Suddenly, I felt a hateful gaze burn into me. I looked up, and it was Cameron. How annoying. I looked away. After the dinner ended, everyone said their goodbyes and left. Vincent stood beside me, rubbing his brow. You all right? I asked. He nodded. Yeah. I'll go get the car, I offered. Vincent stopped me. I'll come with you. Sure. He walked next to me at a normal pace, looking perfectly steady. Until we rounded the corner, and ran right into Cameron. He still hadn't left? I was surprised, but then again, it wasn't my business. I tugged Vincent's hand to leave. To my shock, Vincent stopped. I turned to look at him. His expression didn't change much, but his eyes were dark and unreadable. Cameron didn't even look at him. Instead, he glared at me with fury. Rachel, you're actually with him. That accusatory tone was so ridiculous I almost laughed. Just as I opened my mouth, Vincent pulled me close. We're married, he said. I didn't even get a chance to react before Cameron's face turned a sickly shade of green. When did this happen? He demanded. Vincent replied coolly, none of your business. He kept stepping in to speak for me, and since I hadn't said a word to Cameron, it only made him more agitated. So what, you two were sneaking around all along, he shouted, pointing at Vincent. Wasn't he the one you hated the most? You married the man you despised just to get back at me. I felt Vincent's arm stiffen slightly. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the way his lips pressed together, almost as if something inside him had sunk. Oh no, was he misunderstanding? I glared at Cameron. He is not the person I hate the most. Cameron's face went even paler. Vincent didn't say anything, but his jaw lifted slightly, and his hand fell gently to my waist. He clearly had no intention of getting into a back and forth. As we walked past Cameron, he seemed to suddenly snap out of his daze. He sneered, Rachel, you can fool everyone else, but you can't fool me. My heart skipped a beat. Sure enough, he turned to face us again, eyes locked on Vincent. She only married you to piss me off. Do you really think she likes you? If anything, this proves she still loves me. My temples throbbed. Where did Cameron even get the confidence to say something so delusional? But, logically speaking, his argument actually made a twisted kind of sense. I frowned. Would Vincent misunderstand? Turns out, I worried too much. Vincent laughed, a cold, mocking sound. He was definitely pissed. Vincent wrapped his arm around my waist and tilted his head, glancing at Cameron. She finally came to her senses and saw you for the stray dog you are. You think you're even worth comparing? If you've got something wrong with your brain, go get it checked. Don't act like your face is anything special. Me? Vincent's verbal onslaught was relentless. That's when I finally realized something was off. I glanced into his eyes. Clear. Calm. No problem there. Then I looked at his posture, steady as a mountain. Still no issue. Vincent, you. Let's go, honey, he said, not waiting for me to speak. He led me away. Behind us, Cameron was panting from sheer rage. I didn't bother looking back, because it suddenly hit me. Vincent might actually be drunk. He wasn't usually this talkative. When we got home, he flopped straight onto the couch. I poked him. Vincent, are you drunk? No. Then do you know who I am? He opened his eyes, smiled faintly. My wifey. Me. Yep. That settles it. Definitely drunk. I sighed. Then a random thought popped into my mind. I crouched down beside him. Vincent. Do you like me? Yeah. Me. It's one thing to suspect. It's another to hear it confirmed. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my suddenly erratic heartbeat. When did you start liking me? Silence. I frowned and nudged him again. No response. Just when I thought he had fallen asleep, he suddenly sat up. Startled me half to death. Shower, he muttered. The bathroom's over there, I said, pointing. Vincent didn't move. Instead, he looked straight at me. Let's shower together. Me. Of course, that didn't happen. The next morning, Vincent woke up with zero recollection of what he'd said the night before. I'm heading to work, he said. Still as cold and aloof as ever. I nodded. But then, on second thought, I stopped him. Hey, Vincent, my dad wants to meet you. He paused. I noticed his eyes blinked, rapidly. When? This weekend? Will you be free? Okay. Vincent nodded, then left. He'd met my dad before at business functions. I figured he wouldn't be nervous. But come the weekend, Vincent showed up dressed more formally than he did for work. Not only that, the trunk and back seat of his car were filled to the brim with gifts. Me. You drive. I need to go over a few contracts, he said. So busy? We can reschedule if you're busy, I suggested carefully. No need. I'll handle it in the car. All right then. I drove slowly, trying not to disturb him. But after a while, I noticed something wasn't right. Vincent hadn't flipped a single page of the contract in his hands. In fact, he was gripping it so tightly, the edges were wrinkled. Was he nervous? The thought made me blink. I felt oddly soft-hearted and amused. Vincent. He turned to look at me. My dad is a good man. He loves me very much. I'm sure he'll like whoever I bring home. I kept chatting, trying to ease his nerves. After a pause, he asked, Did you ever bring Cameron home before? No, I replied honestly. Because I hadn't. He gave a quiet I could tell he felt a little better. Then, out of nowhere, a black motorcycle came speeding toward us, straight for the driver's side. Rachel. Vincent reacted first. He lunged from the passenger seat, grabbing my steering wheel. Bang! The car swerved away from a direct hit but crashed into the roadside guardrail. The impact was rough. My chest ached from the jolt. Vincent's forehead was bleeding. His brows were furrowed. Thankfully, because of his quick reflexes, and my slow speed, the crash wasn't too severe. I went for a CT scan. Nothing serious. Vincent wasn't so lucky. He fractured a bone in his hand and had a mild concussion. When I returned to the hospital room with his medication, I ran into a traffic officer just leaving. The suspect has been taken into custody. Don't worry, we'll have answers soon. Vincent gave a quiet His forehead was bandaged, and his face looked pale from blood loss. When he saw me standing in the doorway, he lifted his hand slightly. Come here. I walked over. His eyes scanned me from head to toe. You okay? I'm fine. I shook my head. Good. I'll get discharged soon. Then we'll go to your dad's place. Even now, he hadn't forgotten about meeting my father. I already told my dad we'll postpone. We can go once you're better. Vincent seemed reluctant, but I assured him my dad would understand. Only then did he relax. He was discharged 2 days later. Since he was injured and couldn't work, I took time off to take care of him. With nothing to do, things got a little boring. To pass the time, I asked Vincent to be my model. I started learning to draw in high school and kept at it through college. But I haven't picked up a pencil in years. Not sure if I'm rusty. As we spent more time together, our conversations became more natural. Sometimes I'd chat with Vincent about my college days. But then I suddenly remembered, because of family reasons, he hadn't been able to attend university. Worried I might upset him, I quickly shifted the topic back to high school. Since he was acting as my model, Vincent couldn't move. He occasionally gave a short reply or two. I was actually really good at painting. Back during charity events, my pieces were often auctioned off for the highest price of the entire show. Impressive, right? As I spoke, I peeked from behind my canvas to look at Vincent. Very impressive, he nodded, his expression sincere. I grinned proudly. But now, there's no time. Running the company takes up most of my energy. Painting's just an occasional hobby. I set down my brush. All done. Come take a look. Vincent stood up and walked toward me. He stared at the painting in silence. I didn't notice. I continued, It's not great. You look better in real life than in the portrait. No, he said. It's beautiful. Then, Rachel, this is the first time you've ever painted me. I was a little surprised. Do you like it? If you do, I can paint you more often. Vincent nodded. A month later, Vincent's hand had mostly healed. I accompanied him to the hospital to remove the cast, and to retrieve our car. While we were there, I heard Cameron was under investigation. That confused me a little. But since it didn't involve me, I didn't ask further. Only later did I find out, he had something to do with the accident we'd been in. He'd ordered someone to crash into our car. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. When I learned the truth, I was furious. Vincent had known earlier but kept it from me to keep me calm. He promised he'd take care of it. Soon after Cameron was released from detention, we heard he'd gotten into a fierce fight with his older half-brother over family inheritance. He'd relied on his family's backing for over 20 years, with no real skills of his own. Now that a capable illegitimate son had appeared to compete with him, Cameron had no time for anything else. Eventually, pushed into a corner, he tried to hire someone to kill again. This time, the evidence was solid. Cameron was done for. After Vincent recovered, he accompanied me on a visit to my parents' house. My dad had been skeptical of him at first. But after hearing that Vincent had shielded me during the crash, his attitude softened. Still, he didn't forget to act the part of a stern father-in-law. If it weren't for the fact that you've liked my daughter for so many years, and even risked your life for her, I wouldn't have approved of this marriage. But now... Dad. I cut him off, flustered. Why say that out loud? But the damage was done. Vincent had clearly heard it. Though he didn't comment at the time, he asked me about it on the way home. You told your dad I had a crush on you. Huh. How did you know? No way I could admit I made it up. You said it yourself. That night you got drunk. Vincent frowned. When did I get drunk? That night you introduced me to your friends. Vincent didn't press further. Instead, he began trying to recall that night. Later that evening, it seemed to hit him. The shower plan had indeed failed. Vincent and I had been married for half a year. 6 months later, we finally held the wedding ceremony. It was grand. Everyone said I'd married up. I knew Vincent was impressive. But I didn't want to hide under his wing forever. So I worked hard to grow my own territory. After 2 or 3 years, the board members no longer doubted me. I became a pillar of the company. After marrying Vincent, I realized, I probably really did love him. But Vincent was too shy to admit his feelings. And I wasn't exactly brave about saying it either. We'd gotten closer. Much closer. But something still seemed to be missing, compared to most couples. Vincent probably didn't feel the same. He was good at hiding things. Often, I could only read his feelings from tiny little details. Like the way my paintings would mysteriously disappear the next day. Don't ask where they went. He hid them. And where? My first guess was the room he called his treasure room when he first brought me to this house. One morning while Vincent was at work, I suddenly felt curious and opened that room. There weren't any jewels or antiques. Just paintings. Lots and lots of paintings. Most of them were old. I recognized many of them. I'd mentioned them to Vincent a long time ago. The paintings that had fetched high prices at those charity auctions. He had bought them. From high school, through college. That's when I realized something shocking. Vincent had really been secretly in love with me for years. And once I uncovered his secret, I couldn't help but tease him that very night. So it's true. You were totally crushing on me. When did it start? Ugh, and here I thought President White was so cool and unshakable. Turns out you've been hiding all these little feelings, afraid to even admit it. Vincent's ears turned bright red. He clenched his fists, trying to stay composed. Rachel, you can't just what? I stared straight into his eyes. Vincent, I already know. Why won't you admit it? His lashes fluttered. He avoided my gaze. Forget it. Considering how long he'd liked me, I guess I'll go first. I leaned in and kissed him. I love you, Vincent. Looking back, I never imagined the quiet boy who once played Clair de Lune for me would become my husband. He hid his love for so long, yet now, it's my turn to hold him tight, and love him openly, fiercely, for all the years we missed. Vincent, extra chapter. I woke up from another dream. There was a numbness in my arm. I turned my head and saw Rachel lying beside me. This wasn't a dream. It was real. I had married Rachel. No one knew how long I'd loved her. Since high school. Back then, she was studying art. She often appeared at the school's eco-garden for sketching sessions, carrying her drawing board on her back, dressed in a white school uniform skirt. She looked especially beautiful. Just to catch a glimpse of her, I would go to the piano room next door after class every day to practice. She had just started 10th grade, but had already made up her mind to pursue fine arts at a university of her choice, an arts college. Truthfully, I could have gotten in too. But my family wanted me to study finance and management. While I was still torn between the two paths, everything at home fell apart. My father died in a car accident, on the spot. The company was left leaderless. I was forced to drop out and join the family business. Before I left school, I went to the piano room one last time. Through the glass of the adjacent art room, I saw Rachel sitting there alone, painting. Hey, classmate. I've got a piece for the New Year's gala. Could you give it a listen? That was the first time I gathered the courage to talk to her. Using the excuse of a performance, I played Claire de Lune for her. Rachel didn't know the true meaning behind that piece. She simply smiled and said, "It's beautiful. I think it's perfect. Good luck." She even said, once the program list was out, to let her know. She'd cheer me on in advance. But really, I only played that song for her. And that was the only chance I'd ever have. After my father's death, people began circling like vultures. A widow and her orphaned son didn't draw pity. On the contrary, the wealth we carried drew only greed. At 17, when I took over the company, no one believed in me. They mocked me, looked down on me, insulted me. Some even told me to sell the company off. What I remember most clearly was one time, just to land a deal, I drank 3 bottles of Baijiu. I remember that day vividly. It was the day of Rachel's college entrance exam. I was lying on a hospital bed, watching news coverage. They interviewed Rachel. The reporter asked her if she thought she could get into her dream school. She nodded. And she did get in. I actually went to visit her campus once. It was stunning. Every corner looked like a scene from a painting. During her freshman year, she went viral because of a photo, her painting beside a lakeside. She had many admirers. I felt relieved she hadn't started dating anyone. But at the same time, I felt helpless. I didn't know what kind of identity I could use to approach her. I had no college degree. I carried a company that everyone thought had no future. That period of my life was truly bitter and empty. But when I thought of Rachel, I found strength again. During her sophomore year, my company finally started showing signs of life. It rose from the ashes. I bought Rachel's paintings at charity auctions. It was the only way I could get closer to her. In her senior year, the Arellano family encountered some trouble. She gave up the fine arts she had studied for years and went straight into the business world. Just like I had. I watched her stumble and struggle, trying to take control of the company and gain the board's support. She even agreed to a political marriage. I thought, that was finally my chance. But she chose Cameron. So, what did he have that I didn't? Even feeling bitter, I never once thought about forcing Rachel into anything. I just couldn't stand Cameron. Who knew he would go so far as to publicly declare his true love on the very day he and Rachel were meant to register their marriage? When Rachel came to find me, I was shocked. Even more shocked when she said she wanted to marry me. I should have agreed immediately. Why did I even make her shoot those last 3 basketballs? When I saw that she couldn't make the last shot and was about to give up, I couldn't take it anymore. "I'll teach you." That day, that final shot, she had to make it. Later, Rachel discovered my secret. A silent crush that had lasted nearly 10 years. I, humble and timid, had once only dared to confess my love in the quiet hours of night, when she was sound asleep and out of reach. But now, those feelings had finally seen the light. And they were met with warmth, sincere, unreserved, and blazing bright.